With both teams having a double game week this week, who are the best Bournemouth and Luton assets? Is it worth using the triple captainship on Dominic Solanke? And with all the doubles and blanks that we've got coming up, is it time to potentially sell Erling Haaland? These are my thoughts going into game week 28. All right, then we're going to start off the video by talking about the best Bournemouth and Luton assets. I'll start off then with Bournemouth. And what I've tried to do is pick my top assets from each of the kind of positions. So goalkeepers and defenders, midfielders and forwards. From a Bournemouth perspective, I think from my perspective, there are three pickable goalkeepers and defenders. Obviously, Neto is a reasonable option. I certainly think if you're on your free hit in game week 29, it really makes sense to bring him in. Obviously, Sheffield United and Luton in game week 28 as a double, both at home. I'd suggest Bournemouth have a decent chance of keeping at least one clean sheet. And Neto is one of the leading goalkeepers for saves. We'll actually get onto a little bit of a player profile about him. Zabarnyi and Smith would be my two defender picks. Zabarnyi, I'd say, is probably a little bit safer for minutes than Smith, but his goal threat and assist threat this season has been pretty much zero, right? So realistically, if you're picking Zabarnyi, you're going to just get clean sheet points. Whereas Smith, he offers a little bit more attacking upside, but probably a bit less expected minutes. From a midfield perspective, you could go for Tavernier or Kluivert. I think both are probably performing at a similar level this season. But what I would say is they're probably significantly worse off for points than the defenders and in forwards. Obviously, Solanke's the number one Bournemouth target, right? I don't think Tavernier or Kluivert really come close. And I'd probably suggest just the better players just with a single game week will probably outscore Tavernier and Kluivert in 28. And particularly considering they blank in game week 29. I mean, even if you're on your free hit in 29, you're still going to be left with these players come game week 30. So I'd probably avoid the midfielders from my perspective. Forwards, obviously Solanke's a pickable option. And Semenyo, he's only playing limited minutes, but when he does get on the pitch, he's been really effective. And given how he scored a really nice goal in game week 27, I think Iraola, the Bournemouth manager, will be hard-pressed to leave him out. So, yeah, those are my top picks per position. Following on from that, I thought I'd do this with both teams. So what I thought I'd do is talk about the three top players from each team, right? Obviously, the Bournemouth number one target is Dominic Solanke, right? He is a genuine triple captaincy option in game week 28. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about him later on as to whether I think it's actually worth using the chip on him. He's obviously nailed to start for Bournemouth. Takes their penalties, plays 90 minutes every game. For me, he just ticks all the boxes of a really good, solid FPL asset. And this season, right, he's putting up some really nice numbers. I mean, 17 attacking returns from 26 starts is really good. And when you consider the quality of fixtures he's got in game week 28, triple captain aside, I'd be hard-pressed not to just give him the armband and certainly bring him into my team, right? If you're without Dominic Solanke game week 28, I think you'd be running a bit scared, to be honest. Couple sort of downsides from him. He has picked up a niggling sort of knee injury. He was a doubt for game week 27, as I imagine most people will remember. He did play the match, played 89 minutes. I mean, I think you can consider him fit to play. But his drop-off in form, his goal-scoring form was pretty crazy up until the Tottenham game is when he picked up his knee injury. And since then, his goal-scoring form has really dropped off. And he does look to be moving in a restricted way. So he is obviously playing through pain, which is, detracting from his returns a little bit. But you've got to think with the quality of fixtures he's got coming up, even if he's playing on one leg, he's still a good option, right? My second favourite Bournemouth asset is Neto, their goalkeeper. Now, I think he's a really nice option. Obviously, kept a clean sheet against Burnley in game week 27. Got fantastic fixtures in game week 28. I mean, Sheffield United, one of the worst Premier League teams I've ever seen at the moment in their current form, right? And if Bournemouth were to ever keep a clean sheet, it's probably going to come against Sheffield United, particularly at home, right? And Neto's also really good for saves bonus. He picks up 3.71 saves per 90, which means pretty much every game he plays, he should get you saves bonus. And I'd say if you think just game week 28 alone, he's definitely the best goalkeeper option, right? And particularly if you're on your free hit in game week 29, you can pick another goalkeeper for that week for nothing. Or most people have someone on their bench as well. So maybe a Neto Areola double up. Obviously, Areola with a fixture in game week 29, Neto with the double in 28. If you double up on those two, I think it works really well. And a good point about Neto too is the fixtures from game week 30 onwards are really quite nice as well. They got Everton, who struggling a little bit for goals. Crystal Palace also struggling for goals. And then Luton after that. three pretty nice fixtures, and I wouldn't be worried about keeping him for that period of time either, or even having to start him. So yeah, I think Neto is a really smart purchase. Now, before game week 27, I would definitely have said that Senesi was my favourite Bournemouth defender, but unfortunately, he came off on the 11th minute, I believe, with a hamstring injury. I think the nature of hamstring injuries, Senesi's probably going to be out for a few weeks, right? Which means I think Adam Smith is the next best thing for Bournemouth. Now, he hasn't started all of the games this season, right? Up until game week 13, I must admit, I'm not a Bournemouth expert. Someone might let me know in the comments what was up with him. Maybe he was injured or just out of favour, but he has been in favour and starting in the Bournemouth 11 since game week 13. And I think based on the number of fixtures he's played since then, you should consider him to be nailed in that team now. And I'd say of all the fit Bournemouth defenders that are currently there, he probably offers the best combination of expected minutes to start games and potential of attacking returns as well. The one thing I would say about Bournemouth though, and I didn't mention this about Neto, but they do have a lot of defensive injuries at the moment, which means whatever back line they put together against Sheffield United and Luton will be a little bit makeshift. It's not going to be entirely their first choice team. So just one thing to bear in mind, makeshift defences that don't necessarily play together every week are probably going to be a bit weaker, right? But I still think with the quality of fixtures they've got, it's probably worth bringing in a Bournemouth defender. And like I said, looking at Smith's combination of expected minutes and attacking upside, he's probably the pick of the Bournemouth defenders. On to Luton now. Quick look at their goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders and forwards. Kaminski is definitely a pickable goalkeeper. Although, general point about Luton is I would not back them to keep a clean sheet in hell. But Kaminski, he does make a really nice amount of saves. Is good for bonus points, right? So I don't mind him as an option. Doty, obviously not really going to get you clean sheets, but his attacking upside is really good. In Kabore, well, he's first choice and he's bargain basement cheap, right? So, I mean, you've got to consider him an option. Midfielders is a bit few and far between from Luton perspective. They tend to only play two midfielders in their team. Barkley and I believe Clark is the other one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Barkley definitely looks to be the pick of the two players, so he's obviously a pickable option. And then from a forwards perspective, obviously Carlton Morris, in my opinion, is their number one. Unfortunately, Adebayo is still injured. I don't think he's going to be back for game week 28. And Ogbeni is the other option, but he's not necessarily nailed on to start. And he doesn't play centre forward like Morris does. So I'll go on to my top three now. I mean, you could probably guess already, right? But my top pick from Luton is Morris. He's got, obviously, the double in 28. And importantly, he plays a fixture in game week 29, right? So if you're not free hitting in game week 29, I think he's a really smart bit of business to do with your team. He's obviously now to start for Luton, plays 90 minutes, and importantly, takes their penalties as well. Even if Luton have a poor game, right, and don't really look that dangerous, all they need to do is win a penalty for Morris to have a chance of scoring a goal. And one comment I would have from watching him in a fair few games this season, regardless of the opposition he plays, just with his strength, physicality, and he's quite smart with how he uses it, he seems to give pretty much all the Premier League defences he faces a real handful. So, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, I think, will be hard-pressed to keep him quiet. And, again, at 5.1 million, right, you're going to want to play him in 28 and 29. But after that, you could quite happily bench him for the value that he is, right? And he's quite a nice, 12th man to come in if you've got any, doubts for minutes players or injuries, etc. in your team. You could just start Morris if you need to, because, again, like I said, he's a handful for pretty much all defenders. He takes the penalties. I think he's a really nice option. Next up, Ross Barkley. He's probably my second favourite Luton asset. He's definitely the best Luton midfielder. And I'd probably say, comparing him to the Bournemouth midfielders as well, I think he's probably the best of all of the midfield picks with a double in game week 28. Importantly, because he doesn't blank in game week 29 either. So similar to Morris, right? If you bring him in for game week 28, you're probably going to want to start him next week as well. Now, I've said that Luton are poor defensively, right? But they don't really seem to have any issues scoring goals. And Barkley, he seems to be not necessarily involved in all the goals, but usually puts together the pass to the assist, if that makes sense. He's definitely very important to that Luton team, which makes you think it's going to be nailed to start and probably plays 90 in both games of the doubles. One sort of downside to him, though, Luton play, obviously, a 5 at the back formation in defence, 3 at the back going forward with wing-backs, and then Barkley and Clark, I think it's Clark, in midfield. So Barkley plays as part of a midfield 2 behind the front line, so he plays a little bit deeper than you would traditionally expect him to play. I mean, in teams gone by, you know, Barkley was a bit more of a number 10 and a creator and a goal scorer. He's got a bit of a different role in this Luton squad. So, you know, his heat map, he probably won't be in the opposition's box a whole lot, but he still has some goal threat, right? 7 attacking returns from 18 starts. And with a kind double game week in terms of fixtures, you've got to expect him to return. And finally then, I'm not massively comfortable about Doty, but I know he's a really popular option and there is definitely justification for a reason to bring him in, right? Partially due to the fact that, well, he's got a double in 28 and a fixture in 29. He probably plays 3 fixtures compared to other defenders in FPL only playing 1. And by proxy, I think that probably means he's going to score more points. When you just consider the lack of clean sheets that are going around in the league, right? Just appearance points across those games alone will probably mean he outscores most of the defenders in the game. And I'd also say in general, right, my comment about him is he's probably Luton's best and most important player. His creativity bombing down the wing is really important. His corner taking ability as well, where Luton scored one of their goals in Game Week 27. I just think he's a really dangerous option. Question marks though, do you trust that Luton defence? Like, could you bring yourself to bring in a Luton defender? They've kept 2 clean sheets all season so far, right? And with the injury, Amari Bell picked up an injury in Game Week 27 that it looked like it could keep him out for Game Week 28. Excuse me. And when Bell left the pitch, for a period of time, Doty slotted in at left centre-back. And it meant that he basically wasn't getting forward at all. Rob Edwards, the Luton manager, fixed that towards the end of the second half. I can't remember who came on, but Doty started playing at left wing back again and started looking really attacking. But based on how they lined up immediately after the Bell injury, I would say there's a bit of a risk of Doty playing left centre back in one of the games in Game Week 28, which obviously would reduce his attacking upside. I think it's fair. You know, most of these players, right, I've explained their upsides, but also they have some downsides, right? You know, Bournemouth and Luton are not the best teams in the league, so their players aren't going to come without their drawbacks. So I just thought I'd highlight that to you if you were looking to bring them in. All right, Bournemouth and Luton assets out the way then. And the next big question is it worth using the triple captainship on Dom Solanke? And I think there are 3 methods I'm going to go through, or 3 metrics, whatever you want to call them, to go through to determine that, right? First couple are going to be the expected points totals from 2 trusted sources of mine. First up, we've got Draft Hound. They have Solanke on 9.6 expected points, which bar Haaland's double game week earlier on in the season is the highest I've seen so far. So, I mean, that alone suggests that he's a good option. He's by far and away higher than any other player, 2 expected points more than Saka, and you can see the rest of the options there. They did previously have Morris and Solanke sort of neck and neck on 8 expected points earlier in the week, but I think based on how Sheffield United got on against Arsenal, that's changed, right? I mean, Sheffield United are the whipping boys of the league at the moment, in my opinion, and yeah, if I didn't have Dominic Solanke for that game, I'd be absolutely terrified. The next metric I wanted to look at was FPL Review, another trusted source of expected points totals. Interestingly, we don't see any single game week players or Luton players in this list. They really look to favour the Bournemouth assets. Again, I think that's likely down to the fact that they're playing Sheffield United first. But yeah, Dom Solanke by far and away tops that list. He's nearly 3 expected points more than any other player. And yeah, I just think just in general, that's one of the highest totals I've seen on FPL Review this season. I think one of the other questions you're going to ask yourself is, when could I use the triple captainship another time, right? And that's, of course, going to happen either in Game Week 34 and 37. What I've got here is a list of the potential fixtures that we will have coming up, and this is courtesy of Ben Krellin on X. Now, I think Game Week 29 offers a unique opportunity to use your triple captainship, purely because Game Weeks 34 and 37, you might want to use one of your other chips to cover it, right? You might want to use a wild card to get your team ready. You might want to use a bench boost to cover it, or you might want to use your free hit to cover the double game week as well. And of course, if you use another chip, you're not going to be able to use your triple captain at the same time. So bearing all that in mind, you know, if you're looking to use a chip in 34 and 37, I think you should use your triple captain in 29 basically to cover off, 28, sorry, to cover off Dominic Solanke, right? But if you will expected to have a chip clear, you know, in Game Week 34 and 37, you know, not use a chip in one of those game weeks, you could well use your triple captaincy there, right? And I think there are 2, maybe 3 assets that compete with Solanke in terms of a double game week, you know, for a triple captaincy. I'd say Son, Saka, Salah and Haaland are probably 4 assets I would consider using the triple captain chip on, right? Now, first up, we got Saka. So in game week 34, it looks like he's got an unlikely double game week involving Wolves and Chelsea. In 37, looks like could be a double for him. That could involve Man United and Wolves / Chelsea, depending on how far both of those teams get in the FA Cup. So game week 37, potential to triple captain Saka. Next up, Salah. So he has a unlikely double game week of Fulham and Everton in game week 34. And a lot more likely double game week of Aston Villa and Fulham or Everton in game week 37. Now, I'd say that's an attractive proposition to use the triple captaincy on Salah there. Haaland, he's got a potential double game week in 34. Looking at that, it involves Tottenham and Brighton, two teams that are not all that fantastic defensively. And then 37, he's got Fulham and Tottenham and Brighton as well. So that, you know, two potential double game weeks there for Haaland. And then Son, Man United and Chelsea is unlikely. Could also be facing Arsenal and Chelsea in 35, Liverpool and Chelsea in 36, and then game week 37, Burnley and Man City and Chelsea. So looking at it, it looks like most of the other triple captain options are likely to have a double in game week 37, right? That's what the likelihood of this spreadsheet is telling me. So looking specifically at 37, if you're not planning to use your free hit to cover it, your triple captain could well be used there. And looking at the quality of the other assets, you know, there's potential to use it at that time as well. One comment I would have, and it's why I personally triple captain Haaland in game week 25, is there's a lot of time between now and game week 34 and 37 for anything to happen. You know, one of these other triple captain options could pick up an injury, and then your plan's just completely in the mud, right? So I also don't think the triple captainship is all that powerful. I don't know what you think, but I actually think you can get more points out of a free hit, bench boost and wildcard than the triple captain. So for that reason, I think I'd probably just use it in 28 if I have it left, particularly considering how weak Sheffield United and Luton are defensively. I can't imagine Solanke's going to have a couple of quiet games against the two of those teams, even if he's running around on one leg, right? The quality of those two defences is really poor. I think he's just used the triple captain this week. All right, one other topic of interest then is it worth selling Erling Haaland? I think in some cases, probably isn't, and you should keep him. But in some circumstances, it probably is, right? In terms of keeping him, I think it's best to keep him if you're planning to free hit in game week 29, right? Because, well, post your free hit, you've only got one free transfer, and you're probably going to want to use it elsewhere. You're not going to want to use your free transfer after a free hit to bring back Erling Haaland. You're just going to want him in your team throughout, I think. And when you look at the expected points for game week 28 alone, which if you're on your free hit is all you're really worrying about, there's not much in it between him and Morris, and I would largely agree with that. Liverpool v Man City is usually a fairly high-scoring affair, so I wouldn't back against Haaland blanking in that game. And again, like I said, you probably want him back for game week 30. Even though he plays Arsenal, right? Probably going to want him back. And you only get one free transfer after your free hit. And I imagine if you're heavy on Bournemouth and Luton players, you might be wanting to sell one of them ahead of game week 30, rather than obviously getting Haaland back in, right? So yeah, I think if you're in those sort of circumstances, probably keep him. But there are some other circumstances where you could well sell him, right? When you compare him to the likes of Morris and Solanke, those guys have got 3 fixtures compared to Haaland's 1 over the next 2 game weeks, right? And I would also say Haaland's not the best captain option, obviously, in game week 28. I think Solanke is. Game week 29, he doesn't even play, so you're not going to want him for captaincy. And of course, you can easily buy him back for game week 30 and beyond. And to be honest, I know I said you probably want him for game week 30. If there was ever a fixture to get away with not owning Haaland, it's probably against Arsenal, who are currently the best defence in the league, you know? Almost back-to-back clean sheets. They just look really solid defensively. I'd also say it's worth selling if you're not free hitting in game week 29, because if you're using your free hit in game week 29, you can put your blinkers on and only look at game week 28 in isolation and just ignore 29. And obviously, if you're not, you need to prepare your team for that game week. And like I said, particularly Morris, right? You probably already own Solanke or just going to get him in anyway. But particularly Morris, I think it's worth having him over Haaland over the next couple of weeks if you're not free hitting in 29, because of course, Morris plays 3 fixtures to Haaland's 1. Even on appearance points alone, right? Even if Morris doesn't return, just over those 3 fixtures, he could get 6 points just for playing, right? Particularly if Haaland blanks against Liverpool, he's already up on points just from appearance points alone. And you've got to think Morris returns, you know, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest are his 3 fixtures compared to Haaland playing Liverpool. I think you'd be hard-pressed not to see Morris score more points than Haaland. So under those circumstances, Haaland could well be a sell. All right, and that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed that. I tried to summarize what I thought were the key points, thoughts, and issues going into Game Week 28. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments what your plans are, if you had any, thoughts on what I've just said there. If you disagree with what I have to say, I'd be interested to hear it. As I say in most of my videos, FPL is all about people with different opinions, right? So if your opinion is different to mine, that's okay. It means our teams are going to be different and the game actually becomes interesting. I'd be appreciated, though, if you do have a different opinion to mine. Just be polite about it in the comments, right? I'll definitely read it. If you enjoyed the video, like I said, leave a like rating. Let me know in the comments about that. And you can subscribe. I just put it earlier. Subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there if you want to see more content from me. And I will catch you in my next video.